We are changing the narrative around two important terms. One is feminism, the other is women's empowerment. So I stand here as we near 2018 or 2018, and many things are changing. Every single day, women are vulnerably standing up, standing out, sharing our stories, and being heard. So yes, though the narrative is changing, and women are finally being heard, some narratives are not. So though we know the old adage that collectively we all rise, and rising tides lift all boats, still we are unconsciously disempowering one another every single day. And when I say we, I mean us. I mean women. Women are not always supportive of one another. That is not a new narrative. I'll share with you a story. I was just 2 weeks ago in New York City at an event that was put on by a major fashion magazine. And in that event, there were all women leaders that were being highlighted. I had the honor of being in the second row and watching two women on stage. One was a veteran of the film industry, and the other was a veteran of the fashion industry. And they were having an interview with one another, which was, again, super excited. I was in the audience. All of these women were surrounding me, and we were so anticipating what they were going to share, what wisdom was going to be imparted upon us. So the woman in the film industry started to share her story. We were all held so closely, like just hanging on every word. And then finally, they had a Q&A. This is our time. This is the time the audience gets to stand up and ask the important questions. So mind you, this is a women's leadership conference. We are here to lead and to learn the tools to lead better, brighter, more boldly. So the woman in the audience stands up and she says, please, can you tell us, clearly you're so successful, you've spent 50 years in film, tell us how your female friendships have empowered you to grow, to get to where you are today. I thought that was made sense to ask that question. I see a lot of nods, right? It seems like a good question. So here's what happened next. She looked directly at this woman in the eye and she went, they haven't. In fact, I have just as many, if not more, frenemies than I do friends. You guys, I, for a living, work with women. This broke my heart. So then, what proceeds to happen is the woman in fashion looks over at her friend who she's interviewing and she said, you know, I gotta tell you, men are better at this than women. Men just bond better. Women, it's not our thing, and I get it. I mean, you know, it's been hard won for us. We can't just go giving it away. Mortified. Because this is the narrative that we are constantly sharing. This is the narrative that the world hears about women. We are catty, we are unkind, we are not helpful, and we don't support one another. We are constantly asking of other women that we stay in our own lanes. And it's not something that any of us want to admit to. No, of course not, because we're ashamed of that. So a little bit about what I do is build communities for a living, two in particular. One is empowering women to build bold businesses, and the other, empowering women to build bold conversations, because I truly believe that if we are not able to be vulnerable and share our truths, we will never get to the other side of where we are. So clearly hearing this conversation and sharing this narrative, that by the way is not an untrue narrative, was mortifying because it's continuing to share this out. This video has since gone viral of this interview. That is the story that we are telling about women. And partially it's true, but it's not the whole story. The whole story starts with a before and moves forward into how we shift from here. So I'll talk a little bit about how we got to this magical space of where the paradigm and the narrative has really shifted to women not caring about other women. Because if we don't know this, we can't move forward. One, culturally, this is how we were raised in this country. Women, or boys rather, and girls are raised differently. So think about when little boys are young, we teach our sons to play sports, whether it be basketball or football. They know that there will be a winner and there will be a loser. And no matter what, you will shake hands at the end of that game. So we are teaching our sons competence and confidence and the ability to compete with somebody else and hopefully lose or win and still feel okay about yourself. We're teaching them to lead at very young ages. Also, we take our sons to the beach and we put them in their tiny little Speedos, or perhaps it's their short shorts. What do the kids wear to the beaches these days? But little boys are able to show up, whether it be at a pool or at a beach, and they show up and they show out and they are confident and happy and they run and they roam and they are allowed to experience childhood and all of their self, and their full self. In contrast, our little girls, we teach our daughters to be nice. We teach them to be kind. We teach them that somebody doesn't have to lose or win. It's okay, it's all good. Just be nice. And so what happens is that our daughters grow up and they can see that there is a difference between the qualities that are expected, or the traits rather, that are expected of them versus their little brothers. Their little brothers are allowed to compete. Their big brothers are allowed to lead because no one's telling them to be nice. No one's acknowledging those traits for them. So our little girls are being raised to understand that there is a difference in expectation. And that same exact situation at the beach, from, I don't know, maybe 3 months or so, we put our babies in bikinis or one-piece bathing suits, and it all seems very cute when they're this big. But again, here's what we're teaching little girls. Your brother, he can show up. He doesn't have to cover up. But you should. And so what that message is sharing with our little girls is shame. Because what's appropriate for their brothers, their cousins, their friends is not appropriate for them. And that shame manifests in adult women. So how many of you, for example, have ever seen an adult woman breastfeeding? I mean, obviously an adult woman breastfeeding. Yeah, a lot of us. How many of you have experienced a woman breastfeeding her baby that has her baby smothered under a blanket? Yeah, because here's what happens. We'd rather cover our baby up than to have you see a boob, because we've grown up in a culture where that is not acceptable. That is the shame that goes from childhood into adulthood. And that's what I'm referring to when I say this is how we're raised. So boys and girls are not raised the same in this country. Second, unconscious gender bias is real. And all that means is that we have expectations of someone based on their bias. So we are, for example, expecting girls or women to be nice, and we're expecting men to be direct and to lead us, to show us the way. There was an incredible interview that I watched with Sheryl Sandberg and Oprah Winfrey. And Sheryl Sandberg said, you know, women are still referred to, or women are still expecting other women to rather be nice. We expect women to be nice. Even now, I stand on this stage as a feminist, and I still expect a woman to be nice. Here's what could happen. Here's a great example. If a man walked into a room and said, hey, I'll need this by 4 o'clock, we might go, okay, yeah, sure, 4 o'clock. If a woman walked into the room and did the exact same thing, she's assertive, she's aggressive, she's bitchy, and she's too direct. Because she didn't have small talk first. She didn't ask me how my kids were doing. She didn't ask how my husband is. Do you ever expect a man to walk into a room and ask you how your kids are doing? No. But even as women, we expect that behavior of other women. So it's no surprise that we are in the place that we're in today. And then there's the tall poppy syndrome. The tall poppy syndrome is envy-based. The tall poppy syndrome is not something that we refer to a lot in the US, but it's talked about a lot more in Australia. And it's the idea that tall poppies, or poppies in a field, are meant to grow at about the same height. And when one grows too high, it gets chopped down. So this is, I love the audience going, yeah, yeah. So this is what we do to women. And women, we do this to other women. When women get a little bit too successful, it makes us uncomfortable. When they ask for a little bit too much and actually get it, we don't like that either. So again, these are not qualities or traits that we want to show off for the world, because there's a lot of shame behind them. This tall poppy syndrome stems from envy. It stems from jealousy. Remember, we're nice. Nice people aren't jealous. Nice people aren't envious. So no, we don't want to admit to this. And then there's the impostor complex. So where the tall poppy syndrome was envy-based, the impostor complex is fear-based. The impostor complex, as Tanya Geisler refers to it, where we are unable to internalize our own successes. So if any of you question whether or not you've experienced it, it may sound something like this. Hey, you did a great job out there. And then you respond and go, it really could have been better because I forgot this, and I forgot that. Sound familiar? Yeah. Here's a super example. My mom for Thanksgiving made a 6-course meal. 6 people, 6-course meal. Everyone proceeded to tell her how amazing the meal was. She made 13 pies. There's only 4 kids. She made 13 pies as everyone proceeded to tell her how amazing the meal was. Do you know what her response was? It wasn't thank you. It was this. That roast beef was dry. Kind of sounds silly, but it's the truth. That is the imposter complex. We are unable to internalize our own successes, and it stems from one overwhelming feeling, and that feeling is fear. Fear that we are not enough. We are not good enough. We are not as good as someone else may be. And so that shows up for us. So, we've talked about several ways in which we've gotten here, and none of them are exceptionally beautiful, but they are, in fact, our truth. So you see, women didn't just wake up one day and decide not to be nice to other women. No, that's not what happened. We were culturally, in many ways, taught to show up the way we do today. So, this. We are, in fact, in our culture, taught to shun women. I'll share with you a story. As I said, I stand here on the stage, a feminist with hot pink hair and pink lipstick and high heels, who works specifically with women. I attend a lot of women's events, and I would like to think that I know better. I mean, I know how we got here, so why would I show up in the world in this way? Except I do, and I have. And I've been guilty of every single one of those. Last month, I was at one of those events that I swear, I don't know how I get invited to these things, but I did, and there was a line wrapped around the block, and I was on the VIP list, so I was inside, and I was having champagne with a girlfriend. I don't even like champagne, but I was having champagne with a girlfriend, and I kid you not, I just turned to the left for a second, and I swear it looked like the crowds parted ways. P.S., there were 1,500 women at this event. The crowds parted ways, and this stunning woman walked through. She had on a one-piece outfit, and everything was hanging out. So I said everything, yeah. So, but here's what happened next. I stood there, I put my champagne down on the table, I put my hands on my hips, and I went, Now, why would she show up like that, with everything hanging out? I run a business to empower women. But that was the thought that came to mind for me. And I caught myself, and I said, Cyndie, this is not about that woman. So here's what I did next. I kept my champagne down on the table for about 1.5 more seconds. I picked it up, and I sauntered over to aforementioned beautiful woman, and I said, hey, beautiful woman, how did you get the courage to show up in a room of 1,500 powerful women dressed like that? I love this, it feels like church. Thank you for that. We spent the next half an hour in a conversation that ended in laughter and in tears. And what that taught me was this. There's an amazing quote by Brené Brown in her newest book. And she says, we cannot hate people close up. She was right. Because the second I walked over to this woman and had a conversation, she was me. And we can laugh, and we can cry, and we can share one another's truths. And so we've got to be willing to move in, to lean in, and to have those conversations more honestly. So you may be wondering, where do we go from here? How do we go from sharing the narrative where we all hate each other and we're only pretending to uplift each other to one in which we actually do? It's not that hard, and there are 4 R's to remember. First, recognize and acknowledge how you feel. and that these feelings are not about the other woman. So the next time a beautiful woman walks into the room, just honor that. Recognize like, oh, yeah, I checked her out. Definitely checked her out. And I'm thinking the things that I'm thinking. Definitely thinking those things. But equally acknowledge that it's not about her, because she didn't actually do anything. She just showed up being awesome, the way we all should. Second, redirect those feelings towards empathy, toward grace, and curiosity. And what I mean when I say that is redirect those feelings toward ourselves. So rather than feeling shame around the way that we feel when a beautiful woman or a successful woman walks in the room, show ourselves grace. Show ourselves empathy. Be curious. Have the conversation and explore. However, do take responsibility and accountability for your fears. Because when we acknowledge what is true for us, it gives the power back. Because fear can no longer take hold of us. The third R, reach out and build conscious community. As long as we as women continue to see ourselves as other, we will never come together. We could never truly empower other women. So we must change this narrative, because when we do come together, we change history. Insert Women's March, history making, January 21st, 2017. Yeah, give a high five to the Women's March. I am not mad at them. We were there. Fourth R. Actually, this is a great quote. It says, there's a quiet transformation happening that is moving us from turning on each other, instead turning toward each other, by Brene Brown. And that's what I mean by build conscious community. Finally, reflect and live your deepest values in your why. Because when you give yourself permission to show up in the world for everything that you are and boldly stand up and tell your truth, you are empowering one another to do the same. As women, we are permission givers for one another, and we have got to take that role seriously. So recognize, redirect, reach out, and reflect. We must first get to know ourselves and hold a mirror up to our relationships with other women before we can move forward. Your courage, your empathy, and your grace are permission-giving, and more so, they are visionary for everyone around you. And it is only via these behaviors that we can truly and collectively rise. Thank you.